Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to a very special edition of my show where I have Miles Doleac here to talk about his new film, Demigod. So, Miles, thank you so much for taking time and joining me today.
My pleasure to be here, Shane.
Awesome. And this is a new horror film that's going to be coming out October 15th. And just a brief description: upon the death of her grandfather, a woman and her husband return to her birthplace in Germany's Black Forest, only to find a terrifying secret awaits them. So I know I got a chance to check out the film and really enjoyed it, and looking forward to chatting with you about it.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it also.
Awesome. So I guess to start, Miles, how did you get involved with this project? How did it come about?
So this is a project that is the same team that I worked together with on our last picture,
Okay.
The Dinner Party. Same producing team, same co-writer, Michael Donovan Horn. So my producing team, Lindsay Ann Williams, Jim Booley, and Wesley O'Mary, and working with Mike as co-writer, we had a really great experience working together on Dinner Party, I should say. So as we were wrapping up The Dinner Party, our last film, we started looking for, hey, let's get something in the works that we're going to target as being our next project. So Mike had the frame of a script, sort of a wild hunt narrative that was set in Germany. Passed it along to me. We started working on it together, putting some more meat on the bones, adding some elements, a lot of the Cernunnos mythology that wound up in the final film. Got it to a place we were really excited about, and to a place where we felt like we could do justice to the script. We could actually make the script for the budget that we felt like we could raise. And then we just put our noses to the proverbial grindstone and set out to do it, and did so in the midst of the COVID pandemic,
Yep.
which was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I'm not sure which. It really was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But we had a lot of really talented people on the show, including those producers, including our director of photography, Nathan Tape, and production designer Julie Tosh, who's back for her third film with me, and the wonderful Rachel Nichols.
Yep.
As our leads. I was so delighted to be able to get Rachel on this. I've been a fan of Rachel's for many years now, and this was her first project during the pandemic. So she really took a leap of faith with us to do this indie film, and trusting that she'd be in good hands. And it was just an absolute delight to be able to work with her.
Awesome. And I appreciate you bringing that up too, because obviously there's so many complications going on in terms of basically every aspect of life, and thinking about trying to make a film in the middle of all this going on must have been a really interesting experience. What were some of the challenges that really came about in terms of making the film?
Well, I would say that COVID was the big one.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that going in. We knew that would be an obstacle. We knew it would be a logistics obstacle with the testing and the sanitation protocols.
Yep.
We also knew it would be a budgetary obstacle because those things cost money, and there's of course not a lot of money to go around when it comes to indie film. We also knew that this was a very location dependent film, and that we had to find the precise right location. We spoiler alert, we weren't actually shooting in the Black Forest in Germany. We're shooting in the state of Mississippi, my home state. But fortunately, the forests in Mississippi and the Black Forest share a penchant for evergreens.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of pine and spruce and fir trees, and so we knew we had to find that perfect woods location, and the perfect cabin location for our hero couple, and the grandfather's cabin that our hero Robin inherits, and a place that we could sequester our cast and crew, because we didn't want people going to and from set very often with COVID being out there.
Yeah.
So that was that maybe one of the biggest hurdles, the COVID hurdle, and then finding that right location. And we looked at a bunch of places. We knew we wanted to shoot Mississippi, which to my mind still has the most attractive film rebate program in the country. But we knew we had to find this location. It had to meet, it had to look like the Black Forest. It had to have a cabin. that worked for our hero cabin. It had to have housing for our cast and crew so everyone could be there on site. And so we finally did find the Little Black Creek campground in part where we wound up shooting the film, and so that worked out. But then even after that, there was a lot of weather. It was very, very cold. It was very, very cold Mississippi December. We were down in the 20s some nights, and we got some rain that we had to deal with. And of course, on an indie set, you don't buy your way out of problems. You have to improvise. You have to pull your people together, and you have to say, okay, we thought we could do it this way, but we can't. So what are our other options? Fortunately, we had a team that was committed to making this film work, and a lot of really smart people, really creative people, and we made it happen. But it was not easy. It was one of the more complicated, harrowing film experiences I've had in the shooting of 6 features. But I'm very proud of how it turned out.
Well, and having a chance to actually see the film, it's like the looking around trying to find that location really paid off, because about the film with the atmosphere and just the eeriness of the setting of it with the plot and how it all comes together really worked out. So it's like, at least from somebody watching, it's like definitely paid off in terms of seeing that. And like, I would never have thought that wasn't filmed exactly where it was supposed to be. And it really played off well in the film. And in terms of, I always like to ask, as like a filmmaker, it's like we watch film, we experience a lot of different kinds of films. And what were some of the films that might have inspired you in terms of creating this particular one, Demigod?
Well, we cast a wide net in terms of our inspiration, visual inspiration, story inspiration, sort of the look of the film. The DP and I put together a lookbook, sort of inspirational images, and some of the films we drew from were It Comes at Night, Mandy, just in terms of the look, the Gretel and Hansel film that came out last year. I think that was early 2020. In terms of that wonderful blue-orange night thing that they had going. The Keep, the maybe the little-known Michael Mann film from the early 80s that had Ian McKellen and Gabriel Byrne, and a lot of the stuff in sort of maybe the original Suspiria, just in terms of the color palette and the framing, but a lot in that realm of sort of what they're calling post-horror, rural horror, Hereditary, Midsummer. There's a little bit of that in the cult elements of the film, and going back to The Keep, for the creature elements and the mythology and that sort of stuff. So I think that we really thought a lot about inspirations for especially the look of the film and the visual aesthetic of the film. We shot on anamorphic widescreen, and we really embraced that look and those vistas. And fortunately, like I was saying, we did land on a location that gave us a lot of play in that regard. But I really think it's it's always a good idea to have some movies or some paintings or some visual inspirations or sort of in the background that's helping to drive and help you to forge the aesthetic, and we certainly did that here.
And it's interesting that you brought up a couple of those examples when you said It Comes at Night and the Gretel and Hansel film. It's like, I definitely could see those kinds of inspirations there, especially because it's like, especially with your film Demigod, the forest feels like another character. And that really feels like it's supposed to be this engrossing place and really big part of the film. And both of those films, you could definitely feel that kind of vibe as well. It's that isolation, and it really came off well in the film. And it's an interesting time for horror films, and it's really great seeing in a lot of the indie films that are coming out and all the different kinds of ideas being brought to the film. Now, obviously, it's like you are pretty involved in this project in many different ways, and I wanted to ask, what did you enjoy most about this experience making Demigod?
I originally started directing movies to provide myself more opportunities as an actor. I just wasn't
Mhm.
getting the kinds of roles and the kind of opportunities. I saw my friends and colleagues making independent films with whatever they had at their disposal and pulling people together and building teams and doing quality work. And I was inspired to do that myself. And that's how I wound up directing The Historian. So acting has always been my first love and probably still is my first love. But the more I direct and the more I see what's possible on a comparatively small budget, when you pull the right team of people together and you get people together who commit to your vision, whether they initially share it or not, but who commit to your vision, and with remarkably, small resources, once again, comparatively speaking, and time, and all these logistical hurdles, they just will this thing to come together. And when oftentimes when you're watching these films and my films or other indie films on the big screen, uh, you don't think about what the budget was. You just think, oh, it's working or it's not working.
Yeah.
And it's really it was, and that to me is one of the most rewarding parts of it, is when you see the team coming together, and you're there trying to captain the ship, and you see the team overcoming obstacles that maybe a lesser team wouldn't be able to overcome, and we certainly had them. We had a cast member fly in and immediately before reaching set test positive for COVID, and we had to recast in the middle of the show, and that had some significant ripples. But at the end of the day, everybody was there and committed to this thing and committed to making something of quality. And when you see that being brought home, and you see people believing in your vision and in your leadership, it's really heartening and it's really rewarding. So I think that's probably my favorite part. Just watching it come together, and in spite of the fact that sometimes the process can be maddening, and sometimes you think, well, yeah, we're not going to get this, or we're out of time, or we're out of luck, or the weather's not going to cooperate anymore, but somehow it works, and then you get in the editing room and you start seeing what you have, and you think, wow, we pulled this thing off. And then of course that's the really great treat, is when you're in the editing room and you have what you have, and you and your editor and your producers and your post team is sitting there trying to bring this sculpture together with the marble that you have at your disposal. But it's always a challenge making a film at this budget level. I mean, any film is a challenge, but in the independent world, you can't, like I said, you can't buy your way out of problems. Your time is limited. You have logistical constraints. But for me, if you bring the right group of people together, virtually anything is possible. And I feel like we had a really terrific, talented, committed group of people on this one.
And I really appreciate you talking about bringing up the idea of like budget. It's like, if it works, nobody's going to be thinking about it. And that's
Right.
the most important thing. And because when a film's really working, you're not really thinking about anything outside of the film. You're in it and you're engrossed in it. And I appreciated your perspective on what got you into directing, and made me thinking about, because this was my first film that I've seen that you have directed, and maybe thinking about those before they get a chance to go see Demigod. What's one of your films that you think would be the one film that people should go check out the most before heading out and catching Demigod?
Well, I would say it would depend on whether they're a horror buff or no. I think my second film I'm really proud of. It's a true crime Southern noir thriller called The Hollow, and just the cast that we were able to assemble on that film, which includes James Callis of Battlestar Galactica, and Christian Seidel of Godless and Boardwalk Empire, and Will Forsythe and William Sadler and Jeff Fahey and Dave Warshofsky. Just a terrific group of people cast, all bringing their A games. And there's a lot of where I'm from and the culture of the deepest part of the Deep South, and the milieu of that film, the production design of that film, the feel of the film, and it's got this really gritty, rural, nasty thing going, and a terrific cast. So I'm really proud of that film. That was our second film. A completely different kind of film, The Dinner Party, our last one, is if they want to use that as a gateway, is far more macabre and twisted, and a bit more intellectual and psychological in its approach. And it's I would say it's maybe have to be a little more patient with that film, but then it's also got, in its last 30 minutes, a lot of action, a lot of gore, a lot of that sort of stuff. It gets pretty trippy and twisted at the end. So I guess it just depends on. I would probably start with one of those, depending upon whether you're more of a police procedural, true crime sort of person, or if you're into the horror, the sort of slow burn horror. I would either choose The Hollow or Dinner Party if you want to check something out before diving into Demigod.
Awesome. I have to add them both to my watch list.
Awesome.
But in terms of, obviously you have this film coming out, and if you could sell it off of, like, what is the one biggest selling point you feel like Demigod has why people should go check out this film?
I think it's a horror film with a really rich visual aesthetic. On the one hand, I think it's a really beautiful film. There's a lot of great eye candy in it. I think it's got a great anchor performance in Rachel Nichols. So if you're into strong performances, female leads, Rachel really delivers this home. The whole cast is wonderful. Johann Smiles too, I think, is really, really great, really funny. It's got that cult element, which is very popular in the horror realm nowadays. For gore hounds, it's got some great practical gore effects, I think. Some of my favorite gore effects that we've done in any of our films. And then underneath all of that stuff, I think maybe it's a film that pokes and prods at people's preconceptions a little bit, about family, about what family means, about lineage, generational trauma, and maybe how precious the natural world is, and why we seem to be obsessed with accidentally or on purpose trying to destroy it. And but there's a lot of that, some undercurrent in there. So I would say there's a little something for everybody in the film, whether it's social commentary, or it's strong performances, or it's great arresting visuals, or it's gore, or it's creature, or it's cult. I really do think it will appeal to a really broad audience, and it's coming out in October, and it's really to me it's the perfect Halloween film. Hopefully you get to see it on the big screen if you feel safe doing so. It's going to be in a lot of big cities, but it's also the perfect film to bundle up next to a fire and grab yourself, a hot toddy or cocoa or something like that, and sit and watch it with somebody you love, or with a group of friends. So I think it's a film with a lot of really, really broad appeal that you can't just put into a kind of single box or a single category.
And I appreciate that perspective, especially because for me, I definitely am drawn to a lot of great visuals. And there's definitely a few moments in this film where I was like, that is a beautiful shot. And it's especially one particular chase through like an open field, and the lighting in the background is like, it was a beautiful shot. And there's a lot of the shots in the film that really stuck with me afterwards. And it's definitely a great time for strong female leading characters in horror films. And whether it's like Hereditary or Midsummer, or like The Invisible Woman, and most recently The Night House, and like Rachel Nichols was fantastic in this. So
thank you.
Definitely a lot of great strong female leads in horror films to be enjoying lately. Now, with a little bit of time that we have, time to get to know you, Miles, a little bit better and your perspective on film. So this might be everybody's favorite or least favorite question, but Miles, what's your favorite film?
That's so hard, and I'm asked that a lot, and I generally vacillate between two films.
Okay.
Both of them are directed by Steven Spielberg. It sort of depends on the week, and it's either Jaws or Raiders of the Lost Ark. In terms of my absolute favorite film, and those are both films that I could watch over and over and over again. Have watched them over and over again. Taught them in classes, in film classes. I'm also a professor of film at Loyola University in New Orleans. And just for what they are, I just think they're both so beautifully done and have inspired me in so many ways. I think of Jaws' famous shark POV, and which taught me that sometimes it's not about what you see, it's about what you don't see.
Hmm.
And of course, the power of music in John Williams' score in that film in particular in building tension. It's really without rival. But yeah, it would be one of those two films. I there are a lot of films that I absolutely love that I think are absolutely masterful. The first two Godfather films, I'm also a huge fan of. But if absolutely pressed, and there's a lot of brilliant films out there,
Hmm.
it would be one of those two films. I think this week I'm more on I would lean more toward Jaws, but if you catch me in a different mood, it might be Raiders. Raiders is the first film that I remember seeing in a theater. And so
Awesome.
I think it has a really special place in my heart for that reason.
Awesome. And usually that's one of the other questions I like to ask people is like, what's that your earliest memory of going to the movies? And that's a special one, a very
Yeah.
special experience with that. Um, and especially getting involved in film and being part of your life. Can you recall like when was that moment, like maybe it was a film or a certain experience was like made you think like I want to be involved in movies?
I mean, it was just that. It was 1981 at the old Hardy Street Cinema in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. My dad took me to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I knew from the moment that we first see Indiana Jones' face, where he whips the gun away from the guy, and he sort of steps into that shaft of sunlight, and I was absolutely transfixed from then until the end of the movie when the Nazis and Belloq's faces are melting, and
Yep.
um, I just knew I had to be a part of that world, and in some capacity, large or small, I've been working toward being in the entertainment business ever since, and that started with community theater and being an actor in my hometown, and then in high school and growing up and going to the North Carolina School of the Arts, and it's just it was in my blood. It captivated me, grabbed me by the throat. I felt at that moment from a very early age, and then of course the first time you're actually on the stage, and I remember the first time I played a significant role in a play. I was 15 years old, and I was doing a production of Camelot in my hometown. I played Mordred, the bastard son of King Arthur, sort of the villain of that piece, and the response you receive from a live audience is just it's intoxicating. So so yeah, but I generally trace it back to that moment of that first time in a movie theater, being able to remember it at least, and what I felt walking out of the theater that night.
Awesome. And that's a really special moment. And I know you mentioned earlier, like you teach about film as well. And I guess, could you tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that you like to teach in your film classes and what are some of the films that you really like to focus on?
I mean, I have a great gig, really. My day job, a lot of day jobs are terribly onerous, but my day job, I get to think about and talk about films, and I teach screenwriting, I teach directing, I
Okay.
teach film theory. I teach a course called Script to Screen, where we take short film scripts, and in teams we break down and prep the script, and we shoot it in the course of one semester. Um, so it's right now my film theory course, which was thrown off the rails a little bit by Hurricane Ida. We're here in New Orleans, and we
Yeah.
missed 2 weeks of classes as a result. So we're sort of trying to get our footing again. Um, but we've been talking about auteur theory and genre. My screening this week is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We're talking about
Awesome.
Western as a genre. For auteur theory, I screen Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock, of course, talk about a film that uses music very well.
Yes.
Um, uh, so it's just I'm as much a student of film as I am a filmmaker, and I learned something. I feel like every time I watch a film or rewatch a film, even one that I've seen many, many times before, and I notice something that I didn't see the first time. And even the last time I showed the last semester, we showed I showed Once Upon a Time in the West, another Sergio Leone film. And one of the things that I tried to incorporate into Demigod was the way that Leone uses close-ups. And he talks about how he want his close-ups are like portraits, right? And they should have this sort of operatic feel to them, and oftentimes they're kind of extreme, and you're not seeing the actor's entire head. Even there's even a direct Leone homage in Demigod, which is the moment where, well, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but where Robin realizes that maybe Arthur's up to something, and they sort of turn and have this standoff, and we have this jingle jangle Western guitar riff. And I mean, that moment is straight out of a Sergio Leone film. So yeah, I get inspired, and I have this amazing job, this opportunity to watch films and talk about films and talk about methodology and talk about why directors made the choices they made, and how they're able to get their message and their stories across to a broader audience, and why these directors still matter, some of them many, many years after the fact. So yeah, it's a cool gig.
That's really awesome, and I love listening to that. And it's interesting because yesterday I was recording I have a every other week podcast that I do with two of my friends that I met, because I work at Rider University. I work at a college. I'm an adjunct there. I teach statistics, but I was in film club all through undergrad and grad school there. And we were just talking about our favorite films of the 60s. And I talked at length about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Okay.
Yep. And my favorite scene of all time is that standoff at the end of the film, and the use of the extreme close-ups and the fast editing and just the strips of their eyes, and how much you can show with that. And of course, Morricone's score, and definitely like the guitar riffs and everything. So it's really awesome, and I appreciated hearing that. And
Morricone, man, he's the man. Wow, what a brilliant talent.
Yep.
Hard to imagine those films without his score,
Absolutely. And I can't imagine. It's like it's funny because can't imagine watching like Cinema Paradiso without that just beautiful score in the background. And like when a piece of music can bring you to that kind of emotion, there's something special there.
No doubt.
And I guess, Miles, my last question for you is, I always like to wrap things up asking this question is, what do you love most about movies?
I love movies' ability to transport you both emotionally and intellectually, sometimes at the same time. And I love, really, I just love getting lost in film. And I love that film can transport you to so many places, to the past, to the future, to kingdoms and worlds that you may never see. I mean, that film makes you think. It's such a visceral medium, right? I mean, it's you see it, you hear it, you know, you go to theaters now where the seats actually shake.
Yep.
With sound effects, you can actually feel it. It really is the closest we have to a fully physical, intellectual experience all at the same time, in our entertainment. And I recently was able to see The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring again on the big screen. And then all the emotions that just came flooding back to me seeing that on the big screen again, not only remembering seeing it for the first time, but the times that I've revisited it over the years, and the James Horner score and Ian McKellen, Thou Shalt Not Pass, and You Shall Not Pass, maybe. And even Enya's song at the end, May It Be. I mean, it's just like, it's a wonderful moment of Cate Blanchett, resisting the power of the ring as Galadriel. I mean, it's it just grabs you by the throat and the heart. But at the same time, movies make you think, and movies make you engage And I mean, movies kind of, they are our number one, and have been for a long time, our number one cultural currency. I mean, they tell us what's permissible. They remind us who we are. They ask us the hard questions. And I just don't think there are a lot of artistic mediums out there who are capable of doing that in precisely the same way as films do.
Awesome. And I could definitely relate to I remember being 10 years old, seeing Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring for the first time in the theater, and just being absolutely blown away. And they're still my favorite films, so they definitely have a special place. But Miles, I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me today and getting to hear more about your film Demigod, which is going to be coming out October 15th. You all should go check it out. And for allowing us to get a bit of more perspective on your perspective on movies.
It's been my pleasure, Shane. I really appreciate you taking the time to cover our film and to spread the word to your viewers. And I just ask that folks will go out and give us a watch and give us a review if you have time on IMDb or Amazon or whatever platform suits you. And thank you for supporting independent film.
Awesome. So thank you again, Miles, for tuning in and joining us today. And thank all of you out there for always supporting your Wasteland reviewer.